All right, so you wanted us to deep dive on that Broncos-Saints game.
Yeah.
And let me tell you the 33-10 score.
Right.
It doesn't even begin to tell the whole story.
It really doesn't.
It really doesn't.
It was a real tale of two teams.
Okay.
One seemingly on the rise, the other?
Yeah.
Well, let's just say the Saints have definitely seen better days.
No kidding. The article called it rock bottom for the Saints.
Yeah.
And it's hard to argue with that after their second straight blowout loss.
Yeah, and to lose to their old coach Sean Payton, now leading the Broncos.
Right.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
Wow.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
This game was fascinating.
Okay.
Because it gave us a glimpse into what both these teams are made of.
Right.
Beyond just the final score.
You're right. We have to unpack this.
Yeah.
So on the Denver side, they're sitting pretty at 4-3.
Right.
Their best start since 2016. Are we witnessing a Broncos resurgence?
It's definitely possible.
Okay.
The win itself wasn't a dominant start-to-finish performance.
Yeah. Okay.
But what's intriguing is that this game fits a pattern for Denver this season.
Okay.
Winning,
Uh-huh.
but doing so in a way that begs the question,
Yeah.
can they keep this up?
Okay, that's interesting. The article mentioned that Denver's offense has had a slow start in 5.
Right.
Out of their 7 games this season, lots of punts, a couple Nix interceptions early on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even though they were facing a Saints defense that's been decimated by injuries,
Right.
we're talking 17 players on the injury report for this game alone.
17 players.
Denver's offense still wasn't firing on all cylinders early on.
Wow, 17 players. That's rough.
Yeah.
But hold on. Let's talk about this Bo Nix situation,
Okay.
because this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He's this rookie QB for the Broncos, and he's been lighting it up on the ground, over 60 rushing yards, 2 games in a row.
Right.
But the article also mentioned he missed out on some big passing plays early in the game because of footwork issues. It almost feels like his legs are masking some potential problems with his throwing.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is Bo Nix a true dual-threat quarterback? Or is he relying on his legs to bail him out while his passing game catches up?
Right.
What we're seeing here is a coaching staff trying to develop Nix's passing skills while also utilizing his athleticism to its fullest.
Okay.
Remember, they specifically pointed out his footwork, which suggests they know he needs to develop as a passer.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that develops over the rest of the season.
Yeah.
But speaking of development, can we talk about that Broncos defense for a second?
Please.
Because even with star cornerback Pat Surtain II out with a concussion,
Right.
remember he got taken out on the very first snap of last week's game?
Right.
They still managed to hold the Saints to just 10 points.
It's incredible. And it's not just this game.
Right.
Last week, after Surtain went down, they only gave up 105 yards to the Chargers in the entire second half. That shows a level of resilience and depth that's truly impressive.
For sure. It's like they flipped a switch and said, all right, we've got this.
Yeah.
So we've got a Broncos team that's winning, but with some questions about whether their offense can be more consistent.
Right.
And then on the other side of the field, we have the Saints.
Ah, yes, the Saints. Where do we even begin?
I know, right?
This game was a microcosm of their season so far.
Yeah.
5 straight losses, outscored 60-10 in their last 6 quarters of play.
Oh, my gosh.
The full-blown crisis down in New Orleans.
It really is. And what's crazy is it's not just one side of the ball.
Right.
The article was particularly harsh on the Saints defense,
Right.
which was once a strength of this team, but is now ranked dead last in the league in total defense.
Yeah. And Sherman's halftime analysis was brutal.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
He said they don't want to tackle. It seems like they want to get their coach fired.
Oh.
Well, that's a bit extreme.
Yeah.
This speaks volumes about the frustration surrounding this team.
Right. I mean, it's one thing to have a bad game,
Right.
but to consistently look that uninspired,
Yeah,
that's got to have fans worried.
absolutely. And you have to wonder how much of it is the defense just not being very good.
Right.
Remember, they were struggling even before the injuries piled up.
Right.
And how much of it is this sense of,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, just not being up for it?
Yeah. You can't measure heart with stats, but it definitely shows on the field.
Right.
And I feel for Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler.
Yes.
The article talked about him making some big rookie errors.
Yeah.
But come on, the guy's playing without his top receivers.
Right.
And facing that ferocious Broncos defense.
It's trial by fire.
Right.
And unfortunately for Saints fans, it's happening under a very harsh spotlight.
For sure.
Remember, this team is used to success. They thrive on that home field advantage in the Superdome.
And yet the article mentioned that by the fourth quarter, even the Superdome was practically empty. That's going to be a punch to the gut for a team that's used to feeding off that energy.
It's a far cry from those glory days.
Yeah.
Remember, the Saints' 2009 Super Bowl team was actually at this game for Drew Brees' Hall of Fame induction.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine what was going through their minds watching this game?
Talk about a stark contrast.
Right.
It really puts the Saints' current situation in perspective.
Yeah.
So let's bring it all home. What are the key takeaways from this game as we see it?
Well, for the Broncos, it's a case of cautious optimism.
Okay.
They're finding ways to win. But that inconsistent offense, especially those slow starts, could come back to haunt them against tougher opponents.
Right.
However, that defense is the real deal.
Right.
If they can keep playing at this level, they're going to be a tough out for anyone.
Absolutely. As for the Saints, it feels like they're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
They desperately need to find a way to stop the bleeding. But with injuries piling up and morale seemingly at an all-time low, it's hard to see how they turn things around quickly.
And the schedule isn't doing them any favors.
Right.
Both teams face divisional rivals next week.
Okay.
The Broncos have a tough matchup against Carolina and the Saints. They've got the Chargers coming to town.
Yikes, talk about a tall order.
I know.
If the Saints can't find a spark soon, this season could spiral out of control completely.
It's going to be a pivotal week for both teams.
Yeah.
These next few games could very well determine whether the trends we saw in this matchup, the Broncos' scrappy wins and the Saints' struggles continue, or whether we see a change in momentum.
It really is gut check time in the NFL, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You know what's fascinating to me?
What's that?
Is how one game can reveal so much about a team's character.
It's true. You see those moments of resilience, those flashes of brilliance.
Right.
But you also see the cracks, the vulnerabilities that can make or break a season.
Exactly. And for the Broncos, it seems like the biggest question mark is whether their offense, particularly quarterback Bo Nix, can find a way to play a complete game.
Right.
Because that defense, they look like they could carry this team far.
No doubt about it. That defense is legit.
Right.
But you're right. The offense needs to find another gear.
Yeah.
They're winning these close games, but at some point, they're going to need to put up some points.
Right.
Especially if they want to compete with the top dogs in the AFC.
Absolutely. And then there's the Saints.
Right.
It's hard to overstate just how dire their situation is.
Yeah.
They're banged up, they're demoralized.
Yeah.
And they're staring down the barrel of a lost season if they can't turn things around quickly.
It's going to take a monumental effort, and it has to start with leadership.
Right.
The coaches need to find a way to rally the troops.
Yeah.
To instill some belief back into this team.
Right.
Because right now, based on what we saw in that game against the Broncos,
the
belief just doesn't seem to be there.
And that's the thing about the NFL, isn't it?
What's that?
It's a game of inches, but it's also a game of heart. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have that fire, that will to win, it's all for nothing.
So true. And for Saints fans who are used to seeing their team compete at the highest level, this current state of affairs has to be incredibly frustrating.
Oh, for sure.
It's a long season,
and
stranger things have happened, but the clock is definitely ticking in New Orleans.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Right.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive into a game that was about so much more than just the final score. We saw flashes of brilliance, moments of despair, and everything in between.
It was a roller coaster.
That's why we love this game, right?
Absolutely. It's unpredictable. It's exhilarating.
Yeah.
And it always leaves you wanting more.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with this.
Okay.
Keep an eye on these two teams in the coming weeks.
Right.
Will the Broncos soar to new heights? Or will those early game struggles catch up to them? Can the Saints find a way to climb out of this hole? Or is this the beginning of a long and painful rebuild?
Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. It's going to be a wild ride.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the journey of knowledge is a marathon, not a sprint.
That's right.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic you won't want to miss. Until then, keep exploring.